Jason Whitlock, imagine you're watching The Lion King back in 1994, whatever year it comes out. You're watching it, and somebody comes over to you and they say, hey, man, in the 2000 teens, this movie's going to be really controversial. And you're like, really? What's going to be controversial about it? Is it that, spoiler alert, Mufasa is murdered by his brother Scar? Is it that the young Simba runs off into the wild and has to make a living before coming back to rule the kingdom? Is it that the hyenas are unhappy with the way that they are portrayed? Is it, all these different things? I said, no. The controversy is going to be that the voice of lions, and you'll be like, well, lions don't speak. I was like, yeah, well, that's true. They don't actually speak. The voice of the cartoon lion Simba is a young white kid. And when they remake The Lion King, everyone at Disney is going to apologize because lions which don't speak have to have a black voice actor or else it is considered to be racist. Would you have believed that that could be a real topic in the 21st century in America?
No.
And not only that it would be a real topic, but that argument would win and that almost nobody would take a step and say, well, it is a cartoon and also lions don't speak. And so the idea that a lion would have a particular voice associated with any particular race, not to mention that a lion theoretically would even speak English, since we're talking about an African lion in general, like this is several steps beyond an absurd argument to make. And yet it's an argument that almost no one at Disney would feel comfortable even pointing out how ridiculous it is.
You know what? If this were about some real change and opportunity for African-American voice actors or just actors in general, I would buy it. But all it is just the typical feel-good BS that Hollywood and these elites are into, a lot of surface-level stuff that has no real impact. It's a joke. It's a waste of time. But it's just where we're at right now in this country. I wake up every day thinking, is this the day it's going to end and sanity is going to return and we're actually going to get about the job of making America better in a real way and just continuing on the journey? But we just are into this surface level BS that has no real meaning or value and just does more to create a racial divide rather than bringing us together. And as funny as it is, and I wish I could laugh, but I'm just sad, man, because so much racial division is being stirred and we got so much unrest and turmoil going on in America. We couldn't even enjoy the damn 4th of July without Colin Kaepernick and other people trying to ruin it, man. It's just, I'm exhausted, man.
All right, so Colin Kaepernick, you mentioned him, on July 4th tweeted as followed: Black people have been dehumanized, brutalized, criminalized, and terrorized by America for centuries and are expected to join your commemoration of, quote, independence while you enslaved our ancestors. We reject your celebration of white supremacy and look forward to liberation for all. Now, he also attached a video. This thing got 176,000 likes, 38,000 comments.
More than 60,000 retweets.
60,000 retweets, all of that.
Yeah.
Colin, you mentioned this earlier. Colin Kaepernick, in an earlier version of himself, had been like, hey, have a happy 4th of July. I mean, I'm not even making this up. Just a few years ago, Colin Kaepernick on the 4th of July tweeted out to everybody, hey, hope you have a great 4th of July. You said what I thought was really fascinating. Evolution only moves in one direction for people like Colin Kaepernick. They can evolve. A country cannot. Such a smart idea. When you see Colin Kaepernick putting up tweets like that on July 4th, your reaction is what?
Well, and I get into this in my column this morning on OUTKICK. It's just how uninformed he is and how social media empowers and legitimizes the uninformed, like Colin Kaepernick. He used an audio as the backdrop for those video images he put out of James Earl Jones reading Frederick Douglass's 1852 speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." And Kaepernick just doesn't have any depth of understanding, and social media doesn't require any depth of understanding. It's like Frederick Douglass used the Declaration of Independence as the foundation for his lifelong mission of abolition and freeing the slaves. It was the Declaration of Independence was his foundation for his argument. He used the Declaration of Independence, 1776, Thomas Jefferson, as the foundation for his argument for freeing African American slaves in America. And so that's one of the main reasons why we as black people should celebrate the 4th of July. The Declaration of Independence was the foundation of our freedom. The other aspect that Kaepernick social media just doesn't require is that, look, man, slavery was a global phenomenon. And in the 18th century, there was basically one country where slavery was a controversial issue. It was accepted every place else around the globe, for the most part. In the United States, it was a controversy and a debate here in America. Long after black people were freed here in America, in North Africa, they were still buying and trading for white slaves. And so this whole demonization of America, as if only in the United States was there slavery, and only black people in America were ever slaves. And this whole not understanding, there were black people in America who owned slaves, white and black slaves. Black people, let me repeat, black people in America in the 17 and 1800s owned slaves. Black and white slaves. There's a dude in Virginia in the 1860s, I think his name's Anthony Johnson. In Virginia, he was like the first black guy to sue to keep a slave for the rest of his life. Lifetime slavery wasn't law until Anthony Johnson sued for it in Virginia in the 1600s. And so America has evolved. No different than how Colin Kaepernick has evolved. Previously, Colin Kaepernick celebrated the 4th of July. They found tweets of Colin Kaepernick celebrating the American military. He has evolved into something else now. Maybe it's authentic, maybe it's not, who knows, but he certainly has evolved. America is just a collection of people. We have evolved. Those documents, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, are probably the two greatest documents of freedom ever written. They laid the foundation for our freedom here in America that we enjoy here as African Americans. The U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. That's at the foundation of our freedom, and it's not by mistake. If you really understand history, and I know you're a history buff, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, these guys, despite owning slaves, were against slavery and planted those seeds in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution because they knew it would be a process to ending slavery. It couldn't just be done overnight. That you had to put in the foundation of America the seeds and the tools to end slavery, and they did just that. Those words were chosen intentionally. Frederick Douglass picked up on them, used them, and eventually America got there. Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, hundreds of thousands of Americans lost their lives based off the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, the emancipation of slaves. of course we should celebrate the 4th of July. We are a major part of America's fabric and its journey towards freedom that is still ongoing.
It's such a well said, and I am a huge history buff. And we're talking with Jason Whitlock. Go read his column this morning at OUTKICK.com. The tension between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as it pertains to freedom and freedom for all people was seismic, and it was recognized in the earliest days of the United States. And I think you're speaking very well in pointing out that the Declaration of Independence exposed the hypocrisy of the Constitution, and the United States of America had to ultimately make a decision: are all men created equal, as the Declaration of Independence declares in 1776, or are black people 3/5 of human beings, as the Constitution declares? And that inherent tension between the two would ultimately lead to a civil war, which, as you are pointing out, hundreds of thousands of people died to fight. And as a result, we had a new birth of freedom. And it is so fascinating to me in many ways how social media, we talked about this an hour too, right? That what we love about great television is the nuance involved in our characters, is the fact that they are not, and I don't mean in the color, all black or all white. They dwell in gray, right? Which is where most of us live for most of our lives. I always say, somebody says, how are you doing? Or I'm trying to be better than I am, right? I mean, I think that's what most people who wake up every morning in America try to do every day. They try to be better than they are, right? And what I mean by that is we all have flaws, and we try to rise towards our strengths. And that tension between the good and bad elements of all of our lives, the angel and the devil, respectively, on each shoulder, illuminates us as individuals and as characters. And what is so fascinating to me is, in fictional life, we embrace that nuance. Think about whatever your favorite television show is, or your favorite novel, or your favorite creative work of art. It embraces nuance because that's where great art dwells. It's very rarely in absolutes, because absolutes represents propaganda. Yet Twitter requires everything to be without nuance. And that is one of the challenging parts, I think. We have this Disney-fied version of American history. Oh, this person is all good, or this person is all bad, when the reality is everybody's somewhere in between, right? And everybody, hopefully, is moving towards a greater understanding. And I hope I don't totally mess up this quote, but the arc of the moral universe bends towards righteousness is something that I believe, and I think you believe it as well, but that doesn't mean every single day everything is perfect, Jason Whitlock.
No, every day is imperfect, and you're right in terms. It's like, I'm telling you, I'm rewatching The Sopranos, watching it with a more mature eye, and it's like, I still like Tony Soprano, and he's racist, he's depraved, he's criminal, he's immoral, he cheats on his wife.
Sociopathic, potentially.
Everything, but I can still see the good in him. He's sitting there with a psychiatrist trying to figure himself out. You know that he's, as a kid, his parents were awful, and they created a lot of the issues that we don't like about Tony Soprano. And again, we have this thing now like, oh my God, there's a person that said one thing 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and that explains everything about it. And that's just not true. And I say that about my own life because I can think of some really awful things that I've done. I'm not a bad person. My overall arc lends itself towards the good rather than the bad, despite having done some things that I'm not proud of.
We're talking about Colin Kaepernick, and
let me add one more thing,
too,
Clay, because I get into this in my column. Please go read it. But the other thing, just as black people, that I'm trying to challenge us on is just like, what is our identity? Because, my mom, I didn't put this in a column because I didn't want to piss my mom off, but she sent me that Frederick Douglass, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And she sent it to me without comment, but she was just like everybody else, swept up in this 4th of July animosity. And I just asked, I go, "Well, Mama, are you a slave?" I said, "Because if you're not, what does this speech mean to you? This isn't 1852. If in 1852 you were a slave, I get it, but it's 2020. You're not a slave. So to the 4th of July, this whole thing, as a free person, as a Christian here in America, as someone living an incredible life in your 80s, living better than you have at any time in your life. You never owned a home until I bought you one. Everything you have is paid for. You get to do whatever you want. So what to Joyce Whitlock is the 4th of July? Because you're not a slave. You're as free as any 80-year-old I know. And so I just, as black people, we seem to be so caught up identity-wise into we're slaves. Well, no, we're not. So let that go. I'm not a slave. And I get that my descendants a long time ago were, but that certainly hasn't been my existence. In 1967, I was born. I wasn't a slave. There haven't been a lot of restrictions that I'm aware of placed on my life or my growth or my level of success. I've had a couple of bad incidents, one in particular with the police. It lasted about 30 minutes. Nobody put a hand on me, but I was treated poorly. That has not ruined my overall experience here in America. I can recite chapter and verse all kinds of incredible things that have happened to me in this life, in America, that have been great. And so I just, no other group of people is so caught up in their past as the mainstream media and social media seems to want black people to caught up in. Let's go back. What Frederick Douglass said in 1852 somehow is relevant to you here in 2020, or so somehow speaks to your existence here in 2020. I just don't buy that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think? So to your point about the media or the culture or whoever it is that is constantly dragging the black experience back to the time of slavery, why do you think that is?
I think it's a system of control and political control. If they can, if somebody wants to control you, keep you in your emotions, to keep you making bad decisions, make someone emotional. People make bad decisions when they're emotional, and so I think there seems to be a group politically that wants to control us and wants us to think America's terrible, vote for me and we'll fix it. And so there's this whole little, we'll fix it. As long we got to convince you that there's this great problem that we have to fix and only we're interested in fixing it, no one else is, and then you can have the success you're looking for. And I can't, and again, I'm not political, I don't vote, but I can't blame it on anybody but the Democratic Party. It's a system of controlling the black vote, convincing us that there's this massive problem that only the Democrats can fix, and until we fix it, your life here in America is hell on earth. I just reject that.